Hi, welcome to Say It I Dare You, the podcast where we pull apart the personal meanings of taboo and hard to say words and phrases with lovely guests and a little bit of gentle peer pressure. I'm Quinn, and today's word is tampon. Period care products, they feel like they've kind of always had a stigma around them, from hiding my tampon in my sleeve so that nobody sees it, to feeling really ashamed to ask a friend for a pad. There's so many opportunities where I can recount memories of tampons being taboo, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation, steering that feeling into a bit of a different direction. Today, I am joined by the co-founder and CEO of Marlow, Nadia Ladak. Hi, Nadia.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. I've known Nadia for a little while. We met through work, and I've actually learned a lot about just menstrual products in general from your company. So I'm super excited for this. Marlow is a modern menstrual wellness brand that has created the first ever lubricated tampon. Beyond their product, they've built a safe space and a community to learn about menstrual health, and they work towards destigmatizing menstrual care conversations as part of their brand. Nadia herself is an impressive talent, recently earning Forbes 30 under 30 status. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Also raising over $1 million in funding for Marlow and being a champion in Canada's entrepreneurial and startup landscape. So Nadia, it might seem a little obvious to you given that you co-founded a tampon brand, but can you tell us why this episode topic and especially the destigmatization of this word resonates with you?
Definitely. I think as someone who's working in the menstrual care space, a lot of people don't realize, but this is something that impacts 50% of the population for 1 week every month for 39 years. It's something that's a big part of our lives, and yet no one feels the connection to the tampon brands they use. It's something they typically just go to the shelf, grab whatever's cheapest and throw it in their cart. But for us, we really wanted to bring, awareness around the space. Mm-hmm. There's this overall trend around mindful menstruation, and, people think about their skincare, their hair care, what they're putting into their bodies in terms of what they're eating, but yet they just ignore what they're doing in terms of menstrual care. But now that that's starting to change and the bigger brands are starting to notice that people are worrying about what ingredients are in their tampons, mm-hmm. and they're worrying about, their hormones and how everything links. So for us, we really want to be a part of that broader conversation and not only focus on the products, but build this community around our brand where we can be open about talking about these topics.
Yeah. And so why do you think that this word in general is so stigmatized in the first place?
For sure. I think it genuinely comes to the way that we talk about this space. So if you think about how people talk about this space, they say the word feminine hygiene,
yes,
which inherently, if you say the word hygiene, it implies that something's dirty, that something is to be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
The word feminine, we can go on a whole other tangent about that too. But I think because there's so much shame just in the way we describe the industry, people feel worried. They feel like they shouldn't talk about it. And so I think that's where a lot of the shame and stigma comes from.
Yeah, I had literally in my notes to talk about feminine hygiene products. I was curious what your thoughts were on that. Because they still have it like in the aisles at a drugstore. It says feminine hygiene products. I'm like, feminine, gone. Hygiene, gone. And then what are you left with? Like, literally, menstrual care.
Menstrual care, exactly.
Yeah. Is that something that you talk a lot about in your company in terms of getting rid of those aged words on how we speak about this?
100%. And I see that across a bunch of different, like, more modern period care brands where they're advocating for that. They never say women, they say menstruators. So they're really more focused on inclusive language and being more mindful of that. So that's something we really value and try and preach as well in part of our content and our education.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to this word, this conversation, I've seen you virtually on a stage, not virtually, I've seen you accept an award before, kind of living in the same landscape of work, and you speak so openly, so fluently about this topic. Was there ever a point in your life where this was something uncomfortable for you to talk about?
For sure. When we started, this was something we never thought we would get into and something we were not comfortable talking about. And I remember growing up, similar to your intro, like I would hide tampons in my sleeve. I would be nervous to check out it at Shoppers. Culturally, it's not something we were very open to talking about. But I think as time went on, I was like, this is something that's just natural. It happens once a month. How are we going to live our whole lives in shame for 1 week? Like, it doesn't make sense. So we started to go on this own educational journey. And I think that's reflected in our content because we're never too pushy. We want to meet people where they're at. We want people to get comfortable slowly and not just be like, to be feminist, you have to talk about these right away. We're like, no, this is a journey. And we went on this journey and now we want to bring you along with us too.
Yeah. For context, Nadia is saying we because Marlow is co-founded by 4 co-founders.
Yes, by 4 co-founders.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of the whole shtick of this podcast too, is like I say gentle peer pressure, and I think peer pressure comes with a bit of negative connotation, but what it truly is a play on words to say like, hey, we're gonna have these conversations and I'll meet you where you are. It's okay if you're uncomfortable, it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, but some other people can, and let's like very slowly and gently take us away from the awkwardness of words that shouldn't be awkward. So tell us a little bit more about like Marlow's founding journey, you know, how it started, but also why.
So we actually started Marlow in our last year of university. And I remember we were doing an entrepreneurship capstone course, and our professor said, the first step to finding a business is to find a problem that you're passionate about solving. And we didn't really realize that that was what entrepreneurship was about. We thought, you know, you have to be the next Shopify, you have to have this big technology solution, but really it stems from finding that problem you're passionate about. And we sat down as 4 friends thinking about different problems, and the menstrual care space came up as something that, you know, it's something that impacts our lives, and yet there's been no innovation in the last 90 years. And, you know, besides the inclusive language that we were talking about, besides the sustainability of the products, the overall tampon insertion pain kept coming up as something that's a problem, because my co-founder was a swimmer and she always needed tampons to compete in her sport, but she felt that she was pausing on life, and because she didn't have products that worked for her, she'd have to skip out on a lot of the things that she loved to do. I remember at that time she told us she had gone to the doctor to see if there was anything she could do about it, and the doctor actually said to spit on the tampon to make it easier. And we were like, how is that the only solution? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And that was really the moment where we were like, we need to solve this problem. This is definitely something we're passionate about. Let's go out and start something. And that's how we came up with the idea with the very first lubricated tampon.
Cool. I feel like that is a conversation so many people, like, you tell that story and 5 out of 10 people in a room are going to be like, I have something similar. And it took me a while to speak to my family practitioner about how tampons were uncomfortable, and I don't use tampons myself, but because I was like, well, I guess they're just not for me, and I just won't swim on my period and all these other things. And then thankfully I finally ended up with a practitioner who had the right words for me and the right care. And I learned a lot, and I just wish that that was maybe general knowledge, because that wasn't the first time I told anyone about that problem. And I feel like I'm thankful that your friend shared this with you guys, not only for the fact that obviously you're a safe space for this person, but also because you created this like incredible business out of it. Like, so when it comes to lubricated tampons in this industry, I know, especially as a woman, probably also as a woman of color, you experience a lot of barriers to just being a CEO, being heard, having good conversations about business. Do you find that there's added barriers because, 1, you're talking about menstruation, but 2, you're talking about lubricated tampons, which is something that I feel like a lot of people don't understand?
For sure. I feel like, especially when we're going out to pitch the business, a lot of times we're pitching to people who don't menstruate and maybe don't even understand the topic. And a lot of times they're like, we don't understand why this is needed. Why is this even a business? How big is this market? This is just a niche product, right? And like, we get so much pushback on the overall story and the mission behind the brand. And so what we've gotten really good at is trying to describe the problem for someone who doesn't necessarily experience it. So, you know, saying, how would it feel to shave without shaving cream, or how would it feel to put a contact in without contact solution? Really describing that friction, that itchy, uncomfortable feeling for someone who doesn't experience it, and automatically they're like, okay, that makes so much more sense. Now I understand why this is a problem. And then they become more open to talking about it. They always come back and say, I went home to my partner, or I went home to my kids, and they're really now interested in your business, and now I'm interested. So I think as long as you have that first step to start the conversation, and you try and get down to their level and just level with them in terms of something that they might understand, then it makes the conversation a lot easier. Meet them where they are. Similarly to how you do customers, you got to do it with investors too. Different profile, but I get it. Absolutely. So when it comes to this online community you've been speaking of, that is a really strong pillar of the Marlow brand, from my understanding as a follower, as somebody who fell in love with your intern, as does everybody else who follows them online. Why was having such a strong online community important for your brand? I think part of it was we wanted Marlow to become a big sister to people, where you could kind of have someone to turn to. A lot of people, you know, like I said, culturally, my parents didn't really talk about these topics. And a lot of times, if you didn't have the gold mine of parents, we like to call it, then you didn't learn about these topics. And similar to your story with your practitioner, like, you feel so uncomfortable, you don't have the right words. And so we really wanted to have that safe space in that community around health, around menstrual health, to come and turn to. And so anything from acne on your period or workouts on your period, just breaking down everything around this topic. And the community part is really important, because now post-COVID, it's also in person. It's having a place to come to talk about these things in person. And so it's not just online, but also going to events, meeting with practitioners. We'll bring in guest speakers. Like, it's becoming this overall movement around menstrual health.
I love that so much. I love being part of the Marlow community online and seeing what you guys are up to in Toronto. They had an in-person event that I missed, but like saw so much content about, and I had such bad FOMO. Hey, it's sponsor time. Today's Say It I Dare You episode sponsor is Flowjo, a card box company that helps everyday people live their best lives through self-care and healthier relationships, one card at a time. I am a huge fan of Flowjo's self-care bucket list, filled with simple and powerful ways to practice the kind of self-love that goes deeper than a bubble bath, because we all know that essential oils don't actually cut it when it comes to self-care. This box is filled with gentle self-care prompts for anyone looking to make actionable change on how they speak to themselves, love themselves, and show love to others. Some of my favorite prompts include a guide to decluttering your social media feeds, or suggesting to take a family member who you don't know very well out to dinner and learn something new about them. These boxes make great gifts for the busy and bustling people in your life, and you can get 15% off using my code SIIDY at checkout. Head to flowjo.co, that's FLOWJO.co, and enter SIIDY for Say It I Dare You at checkout for 15% off store-wide. And take care of yourselves, damn it. You mentioned your parents. Feel free to skip this question if you want to. But what is that relationship like now, knowing that you own the business that you own and probably speak to them about it? You said you grew up not really talking about it. What's it like with them now?
So one of my favorite stories to tell is the story when I came home. So I was actually working full-time in consulting at KPMG before starting Marlow after graduation. And I came home one day and I was like, Dad, I'm thinking of quitting that stable full-time corporate job that you've always wanted for me. I know you immigrated here to get that for me, to work on this tampon business that has no funding, has no product developed yet. And I'm just going to do it. And he was like, what are you talking? Like, he was so shocked. He couldn't believe it. But now he's like my biggest supporter, and he'll post about it on LinkedIn. We actually just did a campaign together for Canada Post. And he was in the video talking about it, about like how now he talks about it with his friends, with his mom. Like, my grandma will even talk about it with me now. So I feel like people realize that this is just a normal topic of conversation. And as long as we can come to it together and they see the passion I have, the passion the team has, the success that the business is having, they're like, okay, there's actually something here and we should just support her. And they love it now.
They became goldmine parents.
Exactly.
I love that for you. I love that so much. Do you find that there's ever been somebody in your life where you start to have the conversation about what you do for a living and the innovation you've created, and it becomes uncomfortable, or they seem uninterested or anything like that?
For sure. Definitely all the time. Like, imagine going to a party and you're like, yeah, I work on this tampon business. Like, they're like, wait, what? I was not expecting that. Yeah. So it's definitely always like, I feel more comfortable talking about it now, but I feel like other people when receiving it might not always be as open to it. And I try and break it down by saying, you know, this is something that impacts half the population. There's people who have vaginismus, vulvodynia. Like, it's not just a discomfort. There's actual medical conditions that make it painful to use tampons. And so I think kind of describing those communities that experience it, trying to bring context to the situation, then people are more open to talking about it. And I feel like more in the recent years, like, people are interested in overall, like, talking about period care, menstrual health. There's the whole wave of organic products, you know, period underwear, menstrual cups. So I think people see the overall trend, and now they're more interested, even if I haven't met them before, to start talking about these topics.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I feel like it can be, especially when it comes to family dynamics or generational gaps of openness and conversation like this. I remember bringing this podcast idea to my parents and they were like, are you sure? My poor partner was like, honey, you're gonna get canceled. I'm like, well, I hope not. Like, the goal is that I'm still a good person, but we're just talking about things that make people uncomfortable. Exactly. Do you find that there's a generational gap in the conversations that you're having?
For sure. I think, definitely the older generations, unfortunately, are always, you know, they grew up with so much stigma, and now in the age of TikTok, Instagram, like, people just go on and talk about whatever. And so I think for us, it's a bit easier, but our parents or generations older than that aren't as used to it. So I definitely think there's a bit of that gap.
Yeah. And have you recognized that in any of your, like, your business development too? Like, we're talking about investors and customers. I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, a good portion of your target market is women going through menopause, right? Do you find that that's a hard conversation to bring to the table for our folks who menstruate in that age group?
Definitely. Yeah. I think people also, like, there's so many barriers. So first, people aren't used to buying these products online, so we have to get them used to that. People aren't used to, like, organic products, and then they're not used to the lubricant. So there's, like, so many different thought processes we have to overcome first for someone to even consider the product. And so that's been a challenge. We find we have really good brand awareness, people know about the brand, but to get someone to finally purchase is sometimes challenging because you have to overcome all of these habits that they're used to for so long.
And not misinformation, but I feel like lack of understanding. Like one of, I guess I'll ask it now, is going to come later, but in a plight to, you know, have these conversations also be educational, I wanted to ask you more about like, what are your products made of and how do they differentiate from what you can buy, you know, on sale at the drugstore? Because when I first learned about your brand was the very first time I ever started thinking about what was in the pad that I was using. And have since changed what I use.
Amazing.
What's the difference for you? Can you help kind of listeners understand so that they have more autonomy over their choices too?
For sure. So our products are 100% organic cotton, and that's the only ingredient, just cotton. The applicators are made out of a plant-based material, and then the wrappers are all compostable. Cool. Whereas traditional tampons you get from the drugstore sometimes have chlorine bleaching. They have rayon, they have fragrances. So for a lot of people, it can be irritating to their skin. It can, you know, be damaging depending. So for us, we're just really focused on transparency, all natural ingredients, just that organic cotton.
That's awesome. I feel like, again, I was unaware. I didn't even know if one was made out of cotton or something else. Like I was just like, oh, I was just been putting this in my body for what, 13 years now. It's totally fine and normal. Okay. Slight pivot here because this is something that it came to mind when I knew that I had wanted to do on an episode, because one of the kind of inspirations for this entire podcast was the fact that I had a family member who once turned to me and asked if I had a plug, and I was like, a what? And she's like, a plug. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then she's like, a tampon. I was like, that is more disgusting than saying tampon in my personal opinion. Like if you're gonna say that a word is weird, plug is weirder. Have you had any other like euphemisms or weird ways in which people have tried to dance around the topic of tampons and menstruation? Do you have a personal favorite?
I'm trying to think. Not for tampon. That's the first time I've heard something like that, which is funny. But like for periods, like Aunt Flo, Shark Week, like,
yes,
you know, crimson red, like, I don't know, random stuff like that. But we're just like, you know, even periods is a euphemism that a lot of people don't feel comfortable. So I'm like, you know, it's just menstruation, time of the month. People say too, if they feel more comfortable, you can say that. But it's just periods, menstruation, like that's more comfortable to say, I feel like.
I have a family member who calls it Wendy. I don't remember the story actually. I know it had something to do between like her and her sister. It's an in-law of mine. But now like everyone else in the family calls it Wendy. Like, oh, Wendy's here. And I don't like, it's so hard to explain to people, but it's kind of cute.
It is kind of cute.
It is kind of cute. But it also, like, she was born and raised in a family that no gold mine parents there, like not able to talk about it. So it was given a different name that wasn't what it is. But yeah, plug really.
That's so funny.
I remember being like that, not to add any additional stigma to the word, but I personally think plug should be thrown out and never used again.
That's so weird.
It was really, I was like, that is kind of gross. I don't like that one. So when it comes to the word tampon nowadays, you know, you talked about how you've overcome this discomfort. Do you ever feel that sense of discomfort when speaking with someone using the word tampon? Do you ever have moments where you maybe avoid it or will say time of the month, or are you like, you know, the brand voice and you stick to it?
I feel like I try and stick to it. Like growing up definitely was uncomfortable, but now that I'm in it, I'm like, I need to preach the values that our company is, you know, breathing and living every day. And if I go into a conversation, I'm like, I'm just going to say time of the month or not say it, like that's not really true to what we're trying to preach and to tell everyone to believe in. So I try my best, you know, maybe once in a while you can slip up, but you know, now we're going on TV shows, we're going on talk shows, on podcasts, and we're just trying to be open with it. And if we ever slip up, like then it's not really being true to our company values. So we do try and be open, and it's something we teach all of our employees who are coming on. So why not also like live that value as well?
Absolutely. I love that. So do you have a favorite story of, you know, a customer or even an investor or somebody in the startup space? I'm sure you've heard plentiful stories of how your products have helped people. Do you have a favorite when it comes to something like overcoming stigma? Have you noticed any reviews that have anything to do with that?
Yeah, I think one story that stands out in particular is a mom was thinking about buying the product for her daughter, and we have a customer service chatbot on our website. She was messaging so many different questions, like what are the ingredients and this, and I'm not sure, and are you sure it's safe, and should I ask my doctor, and so many questions. And we're like, you know, like at the end of the day, it's your choice, giving her all the information, and she decided to buy it. and then we didn't really hear from her. So we're like, okay, well, hopefully she liked it. A month later, a review came in and she was like, this changed my daughter's life. She has not been able to use tampons for 9 years, and now she's so comfortable. I love the customer service you gave, and like now this has changed her life. And we were like crying. We're like, this is why we do what we do. Like, this is amazing. And we thought like, oh, maybe we're not going to hear from her again. But the fact that a month later, probably after she got the chance to try a product, she reviewed, she left those comments. We're like, this is amazing, and this is literally why we wake up every day.
Yeah, well, and also nice to know that this family is talking about it and looking out for each other and searching up reasons, or not reasons, sorry, but like products that can help their own family members. It's nice to know that those conversations are happening behind closed doors. It's funny, I was actually just on a camping trip at this place where my family used to go camping every single year, and I actually got my first period there, and it was the summer, I wanted to go swimming, and I remember learning how to put in a tampon in like an outhouse of a campground. And my sibling like standing outside the door, like coaching me through it, being like, no, it's not supposed to go on this angle. And I was just at that campground again the past couple of weeks, and I went home to my dad, my stepmom, and was like, do you remember that? Like, that was such a weird time, because I also didn't want my family to know. And I remember my stepmom knew and my sibling knew, and I was pissed that my sibling found out. I was like, I don't want them to know, like that's not fun. And now I laugh at it, and I'm like, it's weird that my first tampon memory is at a campground. But I came home to my parents now as a 26-year-old and was like, was that you or was that me? And we had an open conversation of like, were you uncomfortable talking about it, or was that something that I just was already ingrained with at, what was I like, I was quite young when it started, which also was like a catalyst for bullying as a kid. Like I was in grade 4 when I got my first period, and so I was like the first in the class, the first one to bleed on a chair, all of those great things. And it's weird looking back on it. I would consider myself to have goldmine parents, and still something in society or something in my experience made me feel like when it happened, I could not speak about it. And for the record, I did not learn how to put in a tampon in that outhouse that day. It was unsuccessful. It was not the place or the lighting. It just wasn't it.
I feel like so many people have that story. Like so many people in the community are like, at camp or like at a cottage or like something like that. And that's a big focus of our online community too, is like people are nervous to talk about it. Maybe to your experience, they can't ask their parents, they feel awkward asking a sibling. So our content creator Asia, who manages our community, she is amazing, and she'll break down everything from like the angle of your tampon or like, you know, how to breathe when inserting it, and like completely does that openly all over TikTok. And like people are commenting being like, we need more of this, like show us more. And we actually made a whole resource guide called The Ultimate Guide to Your First Period. And so if you're interested, I feel like that's an amazing guide too, but talking about all these things around like, how to insert your very first tampon, all the parts of your body, and like just having that open information for people who don't normally get it. I'll
definitely link that Ultimate Guide in the description. I consume like Marlow's content and am a lover of the education that you guys provide. Do you have a specific campaign or a specific blog or piece of education that you have found the most helpful?
I feel like one that people really like is our guide to IUDs. And so we actually had one of our content creators, she's a blog writer, Maddie, go through and vlog her whole experience getting an IUD and like the thoughts she was having, what her doctor was sharing with her. And people like months later go back and comment being like, I saved this video, I'm getting my IUD tomorrow and I just rewatched it, and like this was so helpful. So I think a lot of people love that piece. A lot of people like the nutrition and your period piece around like, how does your nutrition or like your stress levels also impact your period? There's lots of good stuff and gold nuggets on there.
There definitely is. I think one of the absolute beauties of the community that you've created is it's not just this, here's how to do this, here's how to do this, but it is that step by step and that conversation of here's exactly what to experience. It's like watching a restaurant review and being able to like read the menu before you go to the restaurant. I don't know if you're one of those people, but I am.
I am too.
I'm like, I want to know what I'm expecting. And it's one thing to just have general information, which is often inaccessible for people who haven't had the education. We could go on and on about the Ontario public school system and our incredible education on menstruation. So I'm glad that there's a platform like yours that is creating space for people like this. Do you find that you have people within the community misunderstanding the lubricant aspect of your brand?
Sometimes people are like, what are the ingredients? Or like, are you sure it's not going to disrupt my pH? Or just like overall questions, or like, what can this be used for? Like, are you sure it's safe to use with the tampon? It won't affect the absorbency. So I feel like a lot of it is around like the product questions. And we've tried to revamp our website actually just recently to address a lot of these common questions. And we have like a little video pop up where if people don't want to read the questions, it's like us talking about it and like being that more relatable face to talk about the product, what to expect. So we're trying to get more into like understanding our customer and the kinds of questions that come up.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see where this business goes. I have absolutely no doubt that it's going to do wonderful things, but I think on top of the fact that it's just a product that helps a lot of people, I think the community is going to be helping a lot of people and having conversations just like this one. I knew that, like I said, I knew I wanted you on this podcast and I had a strong feeling you'd say yes because I've watched you speak and I know that this is kind of in alignment with the things that you work on. Is there anything that Marlow has been up to lately that you would like to share or tell the world about? Where can people find you, all that stuff?
For sure. Actually, we just went on Dragon's Den recently, and our episode is airing this week, which is super exciting. So definitely check that out. We're also starting to launch into retailers. So if anyone has any favorite retailers that they want to see our product at, we're always open to like suggestions and where they think the product should be. And then back to that community point, like all of our blogs are open sourced for the most part. Like we get the topics from our community. So if there's a piece of content that we haven't gotten out yet, a question that you're dying to have answered, we love getting that community focus and having people ask questions that we can then turn to our blog team, have them write about them, research. So any, questions about your body, about periods that you want to know, we're always open to that too.
I love that. Yeah. By the time this episode comes out, that Dragon's Den episode will be out. So I will make sure to link it. Nadia can't tell me what happened. So I'm very excited to find out this week. I'm sure that's probably the hardest secret you've ever kept. Where can people find you and Marlow online if they want to get connected?
So our Instagram and TikTok is at Marlow, and our website is wearemarlow.com. The we are is really that community focus. And then all of our founding team posts a lot of like behind the scenes content, us pitching, us going to retail meetings. We just really want to have that like building in public kind of vibe and personality. So you can also follow the behind the scenes of our founder accounts to see what we're getting up to as well.
Awesome. I will link all of those because there are 4 of them and that's a lot for Nadia to be spelling out. Nadia, thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like I have learned so much from your brand before this conversation, and now I've learned even more about it from this conversation. I appreciate you not only showing up today to have this talk, but to showing up all the time in your literal career to be the type of person, gently peer pressuring people into talking about menstruation and being open about it. Thank you for listening. You can follow, download, subscribe, leave a review, please and thank you. You can also find us on Instagram or TikTok at Say It I Dare You Pod, or find me personally on Instagram at Quinn Palmer. If you do have any episode ideas, if you know of someone who might want to be on an episode, please feel free to send us a message. We would absolutely love to hear your ideas. And otherwise, thank you, Nadia.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And we will see you next week.
That's all. Amazing.